Hello and welcome back to Nolan Financial Radio. My name is Tara Nolan and I'm with Nolan Financial. If you are new to the show, welcome. We are talking every week about educational topics. This week we're going to be talking about, so you want to retire early? What I will say is, as we go through the show, if there's a question that you still need to ask, please feel free to give Chris and I a call at 719-210-4242. The whole point of these shows is educating people. We really believe that financial success starts when you can ask good questions. And so that's what these shows are all about, is giving you some good questions that you should be asking and getting your financial plan on track the way it should be. So you should also visit my website at www.taraenolan.com. While you're there, you can click on the radio page, and there you can see all the past shows that we've done. We do all these educational topics from Medicare and Medicaid to IRA to 401ks to vacationing, and click on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So that way you can just subscribe to the show and get notifications. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out to Chris and I if you have a question or you just want to go ahead and set up a face-to-face meeting. That number is 719-210-4242. So we're going to be talking today about retiring early. But before I jumped in, I wanted to reach out and say hi to my amazing co-host, Tony Shore. Tony, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know about amazing, but I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thanks for that great intro. Once again, Tara, great to be here with you. And I always I have to smile when we're waiting to come in and I'm hearing that introduction music, the sweet guitar licks on that introduction. Awesome. You got some great intro music there. I love it. I've been good. I've been busy with the family and work. How about you? What are you and Chris up to? Are you guys keeping busy? How's that book coming?
The book is coming, and I just say it's an endeavor. I'm growing respect for other authors that I have read their books. I'm growing a deeper sense of respect of the amount of time it took to put any book together.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I will be very honored for anyone who reads my book when it's done, because it really is a labor of love.
Yeah. Well, it has to be at this point. I know how long you've been working on it and how hard you've worked on it and how much you've put into it. And I always wanted to be a writer, but it's just a mountain. It's like looking, it's tough. I admire writers. I really do. And I love to read and I love books. So, hopefully I can be one of the first people to get a copy of your book and read it. I'm going to do that. I'll read it from start to finish, straight through. It's going to be a page turner. I can tell. I can't wait to find out what happens in the end. That's
well, I can just tell you, Tony, it's a real team effort, and I'm actually getting some advanced readers to kind of go through it and give me that second eye to say, okay, this chapter, I see what you're saying, and I got a little lost right here, or can you talk more about this? So it's really going to be a team effort, and I'm getting pretty excited about it.
And no spoilers, but the butler did it in the library with a candlestick.
Of course.
With the candle holder. Anyway, so what are we talking about on the show today? You said retiring early, and this has come up within the context of past shows. I think we mentioned it just a week or two ago, but so you want to retire early is the name of your show today. I'm interested. A lot of people do talk about, hey, maybe I can retire early, but it's not always that easy, right?
It's a big shift, I think, in the psyche of the country, actually, because we're going away from when there used to be like a lot of good like factory jobs, or, people used to work for Sears as a job and retire from that, Sears or JCPenney. Like that used to be a job that you could support your family on, and you could retire and have a pension. So with my grandparents, the mindset was, graduate, get yourself a good job, and then you work there until you retire and get your pension.
Yeah.
What's happened now, because pensions are gone, is people are, I think, people will do at least 5 or 6 different jobs in their life and try to figure out, there's a lot more emphasis on finding something that's fulfilling in addition to just making money. And one of the big dreams out there that a lot of people have is I want to retire early so that I can enjoy life while I'm still young and fit. Like, I don't want to wait until I'm 60 and then try to work it in. So there's a lot of folks that I come across that are going, I would really like to retire early. And so what we want to talk today about, Tony, is there's the difference in the dream of I want to retire early, and then have you done any planning to try to make that a reality?
Yeah.
And I think, there was an article that said like 11% of workers under the age of 60 say that they plan to retire early. So not that many. And because it takes planning and you have to think about it. So that's what we want to do today is go, if this is something you're thinking about, let's make a list of all the things that you need to consider, because if you want to do it, that's awesome. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's jump into it. I mean, I don't have any retirement plans yet. So I guess you're stuck with me. You and our listeners are going to be stuck with me for a while, Tara. I think I want to keep doing this as long as my voice holds out. So, but I'm excited about this topic because I think it's easy for anybody out there to say to themselves, hey, I've got enough money put away so I can retire. But I can tell from what you're saying, and I just know that, there's the unknown, and it's not as simple as maybe even having enough money in the bank. There are a lot of factors to retiring early that a lot of people may not realize. So we're going to go over some of those today.
So Tony, I mean, we're going to jump right in. The big one out there is healthcare. And it's frustrating for me because it becomes like such a partisan issue. Like if you're a Democrat or Republican, I don't care about any of that. So here's my opinion as a small business owner. Is I would love to see if healthcare was just universal, Medicare for all, whatever you call it. And here's why. Because can you imagine your life if you were able to just dig into your passion, figure out what it is that you love to do, and do that? Because how many people have a job that they hate because they need healthcare for their family? Yeah. So many people.
My next door neighbor has a great pension, but he can't afford, his wife is so much younger than he is that he couldn't retire when he wants to. He's still working and he's 70 because the money it would cost once if he left his job, he would no longer have the great healthcare benefits, and he would be paying thousands of dollars a month. He'd be paying $1,500 a month for health insurance.
Tony, that is common. That happens for a lot of people where the older person in a relationship is able to retire, but they can't because they can't afford the medical care for their spouse.
Yeah.
And so I really am starting to feel more and more strongly about this as I sit down and help people do their financial planning is it would be so nice to take healthcare off the table as a consideration you had to do with how do I want to spend my life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all want to have those go-go years. You've talked about before, there's 3 stages of retirement: the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And retiring early, it will extend the go-go years when you can actually do things, right? And you want to enjoy retirement, but there are so many hindrances to retiring early. And the big one you said is healthcare costs and health insurance, right?
It is. And so I have my dream of how I would like to be. But meanwhile, this show is talking about reality. And so here's where we are today.
Back to reality.
Back to reality. Back from my dream world. But so what we want to do is if you want to retire early, one of the things we need to factor in is how do you plan for healthcare? And healthcare is one of those things that you plan for. Like you want to have money available if you need it, but you don't want it locked up so that you can't spend it. And so that's one of the things that we really want to look at if you're retiring early is you got to sit down because there's different ways to get that done, but that is a problem that you need to solve.
Yeah. So there's a number of things you should know about early retirement. And you're saying the first one is that healthcare is expensive. You've got to keep that in mind and take that into account. And Medicare doesn't kick in until age 65, and it doesn't cover everything, as we've discussed before. And I think I just heard my wallet scream. When I think about what healthcare costs, right?
Well, just here's some simple math for those listening that like to hear some numbers is if your household income is $50,000, just to keep the numbers simple, a mid-level silver healthcare plan is going to run you about $340 a month, Tony, or about $4,000 a year.
Yep.
So when you're making $50,000, $4,000 is a significant chunk. And you can add zeros to that example to apply to your income level, but healthcare is expensive.
It is. And that's the cheapest I've heard. I mean, my wife and I looked at family coverage, and I mean, it was even in the mid-level silver plan, it was going to be like, $800-900. So it's outrageous. So,
So
and a mid-level plan isn't even going to cover everything you probably need.
it really won't, and they usually have very high deductibles, and so you still have to have money on hand. So again, that's this dream of retiring early. This needs to be a big factor that you account for sure.
Yeah, and people think that, oh, I've got this nest egg built up, it's enough to retire on, I can just pull money out of that to cover healthcare. But you don't want to dip too far into your nest egg early on to cover healthcare, because then you're not going to have it later on when you need it, when you need long-term care, or when you need to pay your expenses. What if you live to be 90, which more and more people are doing? How are you going to pay for that? So I think it's important to keep that in consideration as well, right?
It is, and I talk about this in the book. How almost all of us we do accounting in our head, and when we do accounting in our head, it doesn't work so well, and sometimes we spend the same money twice,
Sure.
or 3 times.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can go, well, I've got a lot of money in my nest egg, and so I can pay for healthcare and this, and all of a sudden you've double accounted for everything, and it's not a good
yes. No.
Maybe it's just me, but I don't think so.
So what's next?
So the next thing is then if you're going to retire early, is you just need to be aware of the limits on your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks. You can't dip into those before 59 and a half. So it's not a bad problem. It's just you want to be aware of it, that if you've got those retirement accounts, like you should, because you're saving, that if you're going to retire before 50, that money it's a good thing, will be growing and doing its thing, but you can't dip into that money early without paying penalties.
Yeah. Once you're 60, you can dip into your retirement accounts, but before that, no. So that's huge, isn't it? I mean, that can make a big difference.
It is. And then, it goes back to, we talk about this, about how do you spend that nest egg? And so you're going to have probably some kind of a mix of Roth accounts and traditional accounts. And depending on where you are, you may not have a Roth account yet. So just understand that when you're spending money out of those traditional accounts, there's going to be taxes that you're going to have to pay for. So it's all doable, Tony. And the foot stomp I want people to be hearing is, if you're going to retire early, awesome. But you're going to need to think about healthcare, and you're going to need to think about the kinds of accounts that you have. And you're going to need to think about how you're going to pay taxes, because these things it's doable, but there's ways to do it that are smarter than others.
Yeah. And you don't want to pay, the penalties and taxes involved if you start taking that money early. If you take that, you're going to lose a big chunk of that right off the top. And that's going to be unappealing for a lot of people. To me, having a workable pre-Medicare health plan and ensuring you have enough cash to avoid tapping into those tax deferred retirement accounts like the traditional IRA or your 401k. I think those are two reasons right there. People need to be working with a financial services professional if they're not already. When it comes to something as tricky as retirement, Tara, as we know, there's a lot to it. We talk about it each week here on the show. You need somebody there who can tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear. And that's tough for some people, but that's where you come in as that third party to help them.
Because retiring early is a wonderful goal, and I want to help people get to their goals, and that's what I help people do. And the thing is you got to challenge and go over all those obstacles and plan for them, go over them, around them, through them to get there. But ignoring them doesn't make them go away.
No. So if people want to meet with you and get this plan in place and deal with these issues like healthcare, like their retirement accounts and when they can tap into them, and how to make sure that they're there, that they're going to be there when they need them, how can they set that up with you?
Sure, Tony. So Chris and I have complimentary appointments we set up for these shows. The number 719-210-4242, because we really want to talk to those people that are excited about going, I want to make sure my plan is good, and I've identified all the obstacles, so I'm set up for success. So Tony, that number is 719-210-4242.
All right. That's great, Tara. And listeners, you are listening to Nolan Financial Radio. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. We're here with our host, Tara Nolan. And Tara, wow, it's been a great one so far. Obviously, today we're highlighting things you need to be aware of before you make a decision about early retirement. I mean, ultimately, early retirement brings with it possibilities that are exciting, but can be problematic. So you have to be fully informed and working with a financial professional before you make that final decision. How would you like to begin this next segment?
Well,
What else do we need to know?
Well, let's talk about what you can start doing right away.
Okay.
The one thing that you should always be doing right away is saving. And we talk about compounding interest because here's the thing is you're making your money, you're working hard for your money should be working for you too.
Yeah.
And I love this. I was reading, I forget what article the other day, and it's just said, you're really on the right track when you're making money while you sleep. And that comes
great.
back.
Yeah.
That's investing. And that's that compounding interest that happens with time. So let me give a simple number. So let's just say if you're between the ages of 25 and 55, if you save $250 a month, that's $3,000 a year. So $3,000 a year, you'll have about $237,000 when you retire. And as long as you don't make a lot of big withdrawals, you can earn an average of about 6% on your investments. So clearly that's a pretty good return on what would have been a $90,000 investment.
Wow. Yeah.
But that's the thing is especially if you're closer to 25, how diligent are you being about saving $3,000 a year? You may or may not be, but think about it that as you start saving when you're younger, that money starts to build interest and you're making money while you sleep.
Yeah.
That is a great way to set yourself up. And Tony, here's the thing. Even if you don't plan on retiring early, why wouldn't you give yourself the option?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you plan like you want to retire early? You don't have to, but wouldn't it be nice just to have that option?
Yeah, it would be great. Yeah. Perchance to dream, right? Well, and I know, obviously compounding interest, I get excited about it. But if you retired at 65 rather than 55 and gave yourself another 10 years of compounding interest, that makes a huge difference.
Huge difference, right? Because as the numbers get bigger, they get bigger. And so you can almost double what you would have done just saving $3,000 a month. So time is always your best friend. And just can't foot stomp that enough. And, if you go and sit down, come and visit Chris and I and sit down with us, we'll just show you the math. So you don't have to do the math. We can show you. And it's just kind of mind blowing to go, wow, okay, I see. I really have some control in my life. And there is I don't just have to accept my financial destiny as it is. I can actually have some input into creating a destiny that I want. But you have to understand how money works.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have you and Chris. I was told there would be no math. So that's why I need you, Tara. I was told there would be no math on the show today, except for you. For me, no. But what's the next thing we need to know about early retirement?
Well, the next critical thing, it's the good news and the bad news that we talk about, is we are all living a long time. We have good health care. And so, if you retire at 65, you're expected to live another 20 years at least. So if you take that down and try to retire earlier, like 55, then guess what? You're just having a longer lifespan, which is wonderful and why we want to retire early. But we need to make sure that we've accounted for that extra time. And so that's why starting early and starting to save early, taking advantage of that compounding interest and having those things working for you, you need to have that because you're going to live a long time.
Yeah. I mean, if you retire early, it could be 30, 40 years that you're going to need money for in retirement rather than 20. For most people, I'd say. So that's, those are just throwing some examples out there, but that's huge. That's a big difference in how much money you're going to need to retire. So having a plan in place to deal with that is hugely important. And I think all of us want to have a long retirement, Tara, obviously, because it's going to give us plenty of time to spend with our families and travel, go on those adventures in retirement. But a longer life also means you need more money.
Yeah. On that note, Tony, that's exactly what I was just going to say next. So perfect transition, because you're retiring early, right? Because you want to do stuff.
Yeah.
And
you want to do stuff.
Doing stuff costs money.
Yep.
And so you also have to get clear in your head, because a lot of people, the older mindset from my grandparents was, I'm old, I'm going to, 65 used to be old. I'm old, I'm going to retire. I'm going to live a few years and that's going to be it. I'm not going to do a whole lot.
Right.
And when you're retiring younger, you're retiring because you want to do things. You want to travel. You want to have experiences. And this is where it becomes important. And for me, Tony, this is why we have money. Money in and of itself just is not important, but money gives us the ability to have experiences. Yep. And if you want to retire early, you need to get pretty clear in your head about what does that mean? So like, for example, I know a couple that they want to retire early, but they want to live the farm life. So they're investing right now in buying the land, and they're not going to travel a lot because they're going to be tied to their animals and the land. And so they have a pretty set amount of costs, and they can get ahead of it because they can invest in the barn and the land and their house. And so they're setting up with a pretty known amount of expenses. Mm-hmm. But say you want to retire early and your goal is you want to go out and travel the world and do that. That's going to be a little more expensive.
Yep.
And you're going to be out and subject to all those different costs that go up every year. So just understand, what is it that your retirement is going to look like, because that's going to drive also how you plan. Getting back to define the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, that's huge, obviously. And I think a lot of people don't take these things into consideration, but you're right. In retirement, every day is a Saturday. When do I spend most of my money right now? If I look at the budget, when do I spend most money? Saturday, the weekends. Well, in retirement, every day is a weekend day. So, chances are, if you're healthy and active when you retire, every day is an opportunity to spend more money. So that's tough. And so you need to account for that. That's yet another good point. And you mentioned maybe home improvement projects a moment ago. It seems to me that if early retirement's in the cards, you want to have a housing strategy hammered out, right?
You definitely do, Tony. And this is one of those strategies that I love to sit down and show people, because it's really satisfying emotionally to just go, I'm just going to get my house paid off. That feels really good. It's that American dream of home ownership. But I like to show people a strategy of thinking about, what if you could create a situation where you could pay your house off, but you didn't? You have the control, but then you still have the ability to use that money. So, but putting all that aside, Tony, here's the thing. You pay off your house. Guess what? You're still paying taxes, right?
Yep.
So even though the house is paid off, you still have to pay taxes. And
you have to pay property taxes and maintenance and upkeep.
Tony, I have a friend of mine who lives up in Boulder, beautiful house, and the taxes are over $10,000, just the taxes.
Oh.
So for some people, that's what their mortgage is.
Yeah.
So in your head, I think a lot of people, we talk about that mental accounting that you do, and a lot of people go, I'll get the house paid off, and they take that down to zero and go, well, I don't even have to pay for a house. Well, you get rid of the house, the mortgage payment, but you still have taxes and insurance.
And upkeep.
So for a house that's worth, let's say, about $350,000, that's still going to be $3,500 a year, just as a planning factor.
Wow.
Right. And then we didn't even get into upkeep.
Yeah. And maintenance and everything else, the lawn and the roof and the furnace and the AC.
So paying off a mortgage, I understand that goal. It's a very emotionally satisfying goal, but you need to understand that doesn't wipe away your housing bill to zero.
Costs. Your housing costs are going to be there, period. You're going to have some. I mean, you can minimize them, but and that may be a plan. But you're right. You have to do the math and look at I could pay off my house, but my interest rate is 2.5% or 3% on my house. And at the same time, people are trying to pay down their house. They got $10,000 in credit card bills and they're 14%. So you have to look at where else you owe money and how much you're paying and really do what makes sense. And that's why you need to work with a financial advisor. I mean, financial strategies for the house, whether it's paying off that mortgage before retirement or downsizing. We haven't talked about that much, but you might want to downsize to a smaller or less expensive home after you retire, or maybe it makes more sense to rent. So it's a good reason to meet with somebody like yourself to get that strategy for their home. It's just one of those linchpins of the successful retirement plan, especially if you're thinking about retiring early.
And again, I love the idea of retiring early. And the thing is I'm starting to crystallize this idea, Tony, is that you have to figure out the problem that you want to solve, because there's a lot of ways to get there. And I think where people get tripped up with finances is they have black and white solutions in their head. They think, well, I just have to pay off my house and that's going to solve all my problems. Or I'm just going to get totally out of debt and it's going to solve all my problems. Those are excellent things to do, but they don't get the full picture.
Yeah.
And so we really have to define the problem we're trying to solve, and then we craft a strategy to get there, because what works for your friend down the street may not be the thing that's going to work for you.
Right. Everybody's situation is different. You're always telling us that, and that is so important. You have to drive that home. I just think this topic is so important, and there's so many things, and we could go on. I know there's more points about retiring early, and if people have questions about that, Tara, they can call and talk to you about it if they're thinking about retiring early, correct?
Well, absolutely they should, Tony. And for the folks listening to this show, I hope you're excited about the option of creating for yourself a space where you could consider that. And so Chris and I have set aside complimentary appointments for people that want to really look at their whole plan, and especially cover the gaps, because you cover everything, it's those gaps that are going to get you, the holes in your plan. And so that number is 719-210-4242, because Tony, the whole plan is solid, but then you got to make sure you're filling all the holes. And that's what Chris and I really like to do, because we do this for a living. So we know what a lot of the holes are. So that number 719-210-4242 to create that plan for success. I'm excited just thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you need a successful retirement plan. And if you're thinking about retiring early, there's that much more work to be done to make sure you're making the right decision. And you don't want to make any retirement planning decisions without working with a professional who does it day in and day out. They know the pitfalls. It's like you said, somebody might be focused over here, and black and white, this is the way I know I need to get here. And they're thinking about, I've got X amount in an account. And that's how I'm going to get here to early retirement. And they're not realizing, as long as I pay off my mortgage, I'm going to be good. But they don't realize they're neglecting other things like their retirement accounts or Social Security. And they might be losing as much or more as they're saving by paying off their mortgage in those areas by not understanding how to maximize those situations or minimize their tax burden. So it's the big picture you have to be looking at. And I know that's what you help your clients with. But great show today, Tara. We're out of time for today's show. It just flew by. What's that phone number one more time?
Sure, Tony. The number to give Chris and I a call and set up that complimentary discovery call is 719-210-4242.
All right. Thanks, Tara. And that does it for today's episode of Nolan Financial Radio with our host, Tara Nolan.
Join us again for another episode. Take care, and we'll talk with you next time.